Hey everyone! Before we dive into tonight's story, if you're enjoying these historical journeys, a quick like really helps the channel grow, and subscribing means you'll never miss these midnight trips through time. Genuinely makes a difference, so thank you. Tonight, we're stepping into the candlelit chambers of medieval England, where one woman's love for her son will tear a nation apart for 3 decades. Dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle glow, and let's walk together into a world where crowns are won with blood and motherhood becomes warfare. You are Margaret of Anjou, and you've just received news that will change everything. The year is 1460, and your husband, King Henry VI of England, has just lost his mind. Not metaphorically, literally. He's sitting in his chamber, staring at nothing, unable to recognise your face or remember his own name. The physicians call it melancholia. You call it a disaster. Your 6-year-old son Edward toddles around the castle, blissfully unaware that his birthright is about to be stolen. He's playing with wooden knights, making swooshing sounds as he crashes them together. The irony isn't lost on you. Real knights are already sharpening their swords, preparing to do the same to your family. The stone floor beneath your feet is cold, even through your silk slippers. Your breath forms small clouds in the draughty corridor as you pace, the weight of your decision pressing down like a millstone. The tapestries depicting your husband's ancestors watch you with embroidered eyes, their faces seeming to judge your next move. Richard, Duke of York, has just declared himself the rightful heir to the throne. He's standing in Parliament right now, hand on the throne, claiming that your husband's mental collapse makes him unfit to rule. The audacity tastes bitter in your mouth like weak old wine. Your marriage was supposed to bring peace between England and France. Instead, it's about to launch the bloodiest family feud in English history. You can hear the whispers echoing through the castle walls. The servants speak in hushed tones about the Duke's claim, about your husband's vacant stares, about whether a Frenchwoman can truly understand English loyalty. Their words sting like nettles against your skin. You've been Queen of England for 15 years, but to them, you'll always be the foreign bride who brought nothing but trouble. The fire in the great hall crackles and spits, sending shadows dancing across the walls like ghostly soldiers. You watch the flames consume the logs, thinking how easily everything you've built could turn to ash. Your son's laughter echoes from the nursery above, innocent and pure, unaware that grown men are already planning his death. Your ladies in waiting flutter around you like nervous birds, their silk gowns rustling with each anxious movement. They know what you're contemplating. They can see it in the set of your jaw, the way your hands clench into fists. War isn't just a possibility anymore, it's inevitable. The only question is whether you'll fight for your son's crown or watch it slip away like water through your fingers. The Duke of York thinks you'll surrender quietly, retreat to France with your tail between your legs like a scolded dog. He doesn't understand that French nobility doesn't surrender. It adapts, it survives, it conquers. Your father raised you on stories of Joan of Arc, not fairy tales about passive princesses. If York wants a fight, you'll give him one that will echo through history. You feel the weight of the crown in your hands, though you're not wearing it. The gold would be cold against your skin, heavy with the responsibility of a kingdom. But it's not your crown you're fighting for. It's your son's future, his birthright, the legacy that should pass from father to son as naturally as seasons change. The wind howls outside the castle walls, rattling the shutters like skeleton fingers. Winter is coming, and with it the kind of darkness that won't lift for 30 years. You don't know this yet, but your decision tonight will split England down the middle, turning brother against brother, noble against noble, until the very ground runs red with royal blood. You stand in the War Council chamber, surrounded by men who smell like leather and steel and barely conceal doubt. The map of England spreads across the oak table like a patient on a surgeon's bench, waiting to be carved up. Red and white pieces mark the territories, red for Lancaster, your husband's house, white for York's growing rebellion. There's far too much white for your comfort. Lord Somerset leans forward, his weathered face grim in the candlelight. His loyalty to your family runs deeper than blood, but even he looks uncertain. "Your Majesty," he says, choosing his words like a man walking through brambles. "Perhaps we should consider negotiation. The Duke of York isn't unreasonable." The word cuts through your patience like a blade through silk. Unreasonable? The man who just declared your husband unfit to rule while he sits drooling in his chambers. Your fingers drum against the table, a sound like rain on a coffin lid. The irony is delicious. They call your husband mad, but you're the one about to make the truly insane decision. Outside, snow begins to fall, each flake like a tiny white surrender flag. But you won't be surrendering. Not tonight, not ever. Your son Edward is sleeping upstairs, his small chest rising and falling with the innocence of childhood. He doesn't know that his mother is about to turn him into the most hunted child in England. The other lords exchange glances like merchants haggling over damaged goods. They're calculating odds, weighing loyalties, wondering if backing a foreign queen and her broken king is worth their necks. Their doubt tastes like copper in the air, metallic and sharp. You've seen that look before. It's the same expression your marriage commissioners wore when they first laid eyes on you, wondering if a French bride was worth the political alliance. Sir William Vaux speaks up, his voice rough as tree bark. The Duke commands significant support, Your Majesty. Half the nobles have declared for him. Perhaps what? Your voice cuts through the chamber like winter wind through bare branches. Perhaps we should hand over the crown like we're passing salt at dinner? Perhaps we should let them strip my son of his birthright while we smile and curtsy. The silence that follows is thick enough to cut. These men have fought battles, commanded armies, seen blood flow like rivers, but an angry mother defending her child's future, that's a force of nature they're not equipped to handle. Your fury burns bright in the cold chamber, warming nothing but your own resolve. The fire hisses and pops, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny falling stars. Each spark reminds you of a life that will be lost in the coming war. And there will be a war. The moment you refuse to step aside, the moment you gather your loyal lords and march north, you'll be signing death warrants in blood instead of ink. Lord Clifford, barely 20 but already scarred from border skirmishes, leans against the stone wall. His youth should make him cautious, but instead it makes him reckless. "I'll follow you to hell and back, Your Majesty," he says, and you can hear the eagerness for battle in his voice like a sword being sharpened. York thinks he can steal a crown, let him try. You feel something shift in the room, like the moment before an avalanche when the mountain decides to fall. One by one the lords straighten their shoulders, their doubt transforming into something harder, more dangerous. They're not just choosing sides anymore, they're choosing to burn England down, rather than see it ruled by the wrong king. The map on the table suddenly looks different. Those white pieces aren't just enemy territories anymore, they're targets. Every castle, every town, every village will become a battlefield before this is over. Mothers will bury sons, wives will bury husbands, and children will grow up knowing nothing but war. All because you refuse to let your son's crown be stolen, but that's the price of being a mother in a world run by men with swords. They think love makes you weak, that caring for your child makes you vulnerable. They don't understand that a mother protecting her young is the most dangerous creature in any kingdom. They're about to learn that lesson written in blood across 30 years of history. You're standing on the battlements of Wakefield Castle, and the December air bites your face like an angry cat. Below, the Yorkshire countryside stretches out white and pristine, about to be painted red. It's December 30th, 1460, and today your war truly begins. The snow crunches under your boots as you pace, each step like breaking bones. Richard, Duke of York, is trapped inside this very castle with his second son Edmund. The irony tastes sweeter than honey wine. The man who tried to steal your son's crown is now cowering behind walls, waiting for a rescue that won't come. Your forces surround the castle like wolves circling wounded prey, and you can almost smell their fear seeping through the stone. Lord Clifford stands beside you, his breath creating small clouds in the freezing air. His father died fighting your enemies, cut down like wheat in a field, and the young man's thirst for revenge burns brighter than the torches lining the walls. "They're running low on supplies, Your Majesty," he reports, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a predator watching its quarry weaken. "Another week, and they'll be eating their boots." But you don't have a week. Every day you wait gives York's allies time to gather, time to march north and break your siege. War isn't a patient game, it's a brutal dance where the music never stops, and dancers who hesitate end up with steel through their hearts. You've learnt this lesson watching French battles from castle windows. seeing how quickly victory can turn to catastrophe. The castle below looks deceptively peaceful in the morning light, its towers and walls seemingly carved from the snow itself. But you know what's happening inside those walls. York is probably pacing his chamber like a caged bear, knowing that his gamble for the crown has trapped him in this frozen hell. His son Edmund, barely 17, is learning what it means to bet your life on political ambition. Your own breath forms small clouds as you speak, each word crystallizing in the cold air before dissolving. Send word to the garrison, you command, your voice carrying across the ramparts like winter wind. Any man who surrenders will be spared. Any man who continues to fight. You let the sentence hang unfinished, sharp as icicles. The message is clear enough. Mercy isn't weakness. It's strategy. Every soldier who switches sides is one less enemy to fight, one less widow to create, one less grave to dig. But the nobles inside, York and his son, they've chosen their path, and that path leads to only one destination. Clifford's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. He understands what you're really saying. The common soldiers might live to see another Christmas, but the nobility who dared challenge your son's birthright, they'll be decorating York's walls with their heads before New Year's Day. Medieval justice isn't subtle. It's a lesson written in blood for all to read. The snow continues to fall, each flake like a tiny witness to history being made. Your soldiers move through the white landscape like dark shadows, surrounding the castle with the patience of death itself. They know this isn't just about winning a battle. It's about sending a message that will echo across England for decades. Inside your heavy cloak you can feel your heart beating steady as a war drum. This is the moment when your son's future hangs in the balance, when 3 decades of bloodshed begin with your decision to show no mercy. The crown isn't just gold and jewels, it's power, legacy, the right to shape a kingdom's destiny. And you'll drown England in blood before you let anyone take that from your child. The wind carries sounds from the castle below, shouts, the clatter of weapons, the desperate movements of trapped men. York probably thinks he can negotiate, that royal blood and noble lineage will protect him from the consequences of his rebellion. He's about to discover that when you threaten a mother's child, nobility means nothing, and mercy becomes a luxury no one can afford. You watch from the castle battlements as they drag Richard of York from the ruins of his shelter, and the satisfaction burns in your chest like mulled wine on a winter night. The great duke who dared claim your husband's throne now looks like any other defeated man, bloodied, broken, stripped of the arrogance that made him believe he could steal a crown from a child. The Battle of Wakefield is over, ended almost before it began. York's desperation drove him from the castle walls in a futile charge, thinking he could break your siege through sheer audacity. Instead, he found 18,000 of your soldiers waiting in the snow like death itself, made manifest. The white ground around the castle is now stained red, looking like someone spilled wine across fresh linen. Lord Clifford approaches York with the measured pace of a man savouring his revenge. His father's death still burns fresh in his memory, and you can see the hatred glowing in his eyes like coals in a forge. This isn't just politics anymore. It's personal. Blood calling for blood in the ancient way that makes nobility no different from common murderers. "You're grey," Clifford says to York, the title dripping with sarcasm thick as honey. "How does it feel to kneel in the snow like a common beggar?" York's response is lost in the wind, but his defiance still shows in the set of his shoulders, the way he holds his head despite the blood streaming from his wounds. Your breath creates small clouds in the frozen air as you descend from the battlements, your footsteps echoing against stone walls that have witnessed centuries of violence. Each step brings you closer to the man who tried to destroy your family, who declared your husband unfit and your son illegitimate. The irony tastes bitter. He called your husband mad, but sanity is a luxury that ends when someone threatens your child. The courtyard fills with your soldiers, their faces flushed with victory and the cold December air. They've won more than a battle today. They've proven that Lancaster still has teeth, that your family won't surrender the crown without drowning England in blood first. Their cheers echo off the castle walls like war drums beating a funeral march. Edmund of Rutland, York's 17-year-old son, kneels beside his father in the snow. The boy's face is pale as winter moonlight, his youth making his terror more pitiful than his father's rage. He probably thought war was something glorious, filled with honour and chivalry like the songs minstrels sing. Instead, he's learning that real war is mud and blood and the sound of dying men calling for their mothers. You stop before York, close enough to see the hatred burning in his eyes, close enough to smell the fear he's trying so hard to hide. This is the man who would have seen your son dead, who planned to rule England through conquest and murder. Now he kneels in the snow like a penitent, though you doubt he feels any remorse for his rebellion. "Did you truly think," you say, your voice carrying across the silent courtyard like a blade through silk, "that you could steal my son's birthright and face no consequences? Did you believe that a mother would simply step aside and let her child be murdered?" The words hang in the frozen air between you, sharp as icicles. Every person in that courtyard understands what's coming next. This isn't a negotiation or a political discussion, it's an execution dressed up as justice. York made his choice when he declared himself king, now he'll pay the price that rebels have always paid. Clifford draws his sword, the steel singing as it leaves the scabbard. The sound cuts through the winter silence like a church bell tolling for the dead. York's eyes never leave yours, and you can see him calculating his final moments, probably wondering if there's any mercy left in the world for fallen nobles. But mercy is a luxury you can't afford. Not when your son's crown hangs in the balance, not when half of England watches to see if Lancaster still has the strength to hold power. The snow continues to fall around you like tears from heaven, each flake a witness to the moment when your war truly begins. You watch as they place the paper crown on York's head, and the mockery tastes sweeter than victory wine. Someone, probably one of your more creative soldiers, fashioned it from tavern papers and stained it with blood from the battlefield. The crimson seeps through the makeshift crown like roses blooming through snow, a perfect symbol of York's failed ambition. "Hail, King Richard!" Lord Clifford announces with theatrical flourish, his voice carrying the kind of sarcasm that cuts deeper than any sword. "How does your crown fit, your grace? Is it everything you dreamed it would be?" The laughter from your soldiers ripples through the courtyard like wolves howling at prey. York's face remains stone, but you can see the humiliation burning behind his eyes like banked coals. He who would be king now wears a crown of garbage, kneeling in mud and melted snow while his enemies mock his greatest ambition. The paper crown sits crooked on his bloodied head, looking more pathetic than any jester's cap. His son Edmund sobs beside him, the sound thin and desperate in the winter air. The boy understands what his father did, perhaps does not, that this theatre of cruelty is merely the opening act. Mercy died the moment York declared himself rightful king, buried in the same grave as political negotiation and peaceful succession. You circle the kneeling duke like a hawk studying wounded prey. Each step in the snow crunches with finality, the sound echoing off castle walls that have seen centuries of similar scenes. Medieval justice isn't subtle. It's a performance, a public lesson written in blood for all who might consider rebellion. "Tell me, your grace, Gundamers," you say, stopping de Vaclet in front of him, close enough to see the fear he's trying so desperately to hide. "Was my son's crown worth dying for? Was your ambition worth your son's life?" Your words hang in the frozen air like judge's verdict, heavy with implication. The paper crown begins to dissolve in the falling snow, the tavern ink running down York's face like tears made of blood and betrayal. It's almost poetic, the crown he fought for literally melting away, proving as substantial as his claim to rule England. Power, you've learned, is only as real as the armies willing to die for it. Your soldiers press closer, forming a circle around the condemned men, like stones around a well. They smell of victory and violence, their faces flushed with the particular satisfaction that comes from seeing arrogant nobility brought low. War makes equals of all men. The Duke bleeds the same red as any common soldier. Clifford raises his sword again, and you can see York finally understanding that his noble blood won't protect him. There will be no ransoms, no political negotiations, no mercy for the man who would have murdered your child to steal a throne. The blade catches the weak winter sunlight, throwing fragments of light across the snow like scattered diamonds. "Any last words, Your Majesty?" Clifford asks, the title twisted into something obscene. York's mouth opens, perhaps to curse you, perhaps to beg for his son's life, but whatever words he planned die unspoken. Some moments are too big for language, too final for pretty speeches. The silence stretches between heartbeats, filled only with the sound of falling snow and Edmund's quiet weeping. You can feel history pivoting on this moment, the future reshaping itself around your decision to show no mercy. 30 years of war hang in the balance, waiting for the sword to fall. This is what victory looks like. Not glorious charges or heroic speeches, but exhausted men kneeling in slush while their enemies decide whether they deserve to see another sunrise. The crown your son will inherit is being bought with blood in this courtyard, paid for with the lives of men who dared challenge Lancaster's right to rule. The paper crown finally dissolves completely, leaving York bareheaded in the snow like any common criminal awaiting execution. Power, you realise, is nothing more than the ability to make your enemies kneel while you decide their fate. The blade falls with a sound like breaking winter branches, and Richard of York's rebellion ends in the snow of Wakefield courtyard. His head rolls away from his body like a discarded apple, coming to rest against the castle wall, where it stares at nothing with surprised, lifeless eyes. The snow around his corpse blooms red like poppies in a field. Edmund's scream cuts through the winter air, sharp enough to shatter glass. The 17-year-old boy tries to crawl toward his father's body, but Clifford's boot in his back pins him to the frozen ground. "Your turn, little prince," Clifford says, his voice gentle as a lullaby and twice as deadly. "Don't worry, you'll be joining your father soon enough." You watch Edmund's execution with the detached interest of someone observing weather patterns. The boy's pleas for mercy sound like distant thunder, meaningless noise that doesn't change the approaching storm. He's begging for his life in French, probably forgetting in his terror that you understand every word. The irony isn't lost on you. He's pleading for mercy in your native tongue, while your soldiers prepare to end his life for his father's sins. The second blade falls with less ceremony than the first. Edmund dies as most young men die in war, messily, loudly, far from home and calling for his mother. His blood mingles with his father's in the snow, father and son united in death as they were in rebellion. The paper crown that mocked York's ambition now lies forgotten, dissolving into bloody slush. Your soldiers cheer like spectators at a particularly entertaining execution, but the sound feels hollow in the winter air. Victory tastes different when it comes soaked in the blood of boys barely old enough to grow beards. You've won this battle, secured your son's future, sent a message that will echo across England, but the cost is starting to reveal itself in ways you hadn't anticipated. As you turn away from the corpses, you catch sight of your own reflection in a castle window. The woman staring back at you looks older than your 30 years, her eyes carrying a hardness that wasn't there when you first arrived in England as a naive bride. War, you're learning, doesn't just change kingdoms, it transforms the people who fight it, stripping away illusions until only brutal necessity remains. The news of Wakefield will spread across England like plague, carrying with it a simple message. Margaret of Anjou shows no mercy to her enemies. Lords who might have considered switching sides will think twice, knowing that defeat means not just political exile but the headsman's block. Fear, you've discovered, can be as effective as love in maintaining loyalty. But fear cuts both ways. Even as your victory secures your son's immediate future, you can feel the shape of the war changing around you. York's remaining sons, Edward and Richard, are still alive, still dangerous, and now they have their father's death to avenge. You've made enemies for life, the kind that will pursue vengeance across decades. Your hands shake slightly as you pull your cloak tighter against the wind, though you tell yourself it's from cold rather than the weight of what you've just done. Two heads now decorate Wakefield's walls, their sightless eyes staring out over the countryside like grim sentinels. York's paper crown lies forgotten in the snow, but his real legacy, the blood feud you've just ignited, will outlive them all. The castle gates close behind you with a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut. Wakefield is yours, the immediate threat ended, your son's crown secured for now. But as your army prepares to march south, you can feel the future reshaping itself around this moment of brutal triumph. You came to Wakefield to defend your child's birthright. You're leaving as something darker, a mother who chose war over mercy, blood over negotiation. The snow continues to fall, covering the bloodstains in fresh white innocence, but you know the stains go deeper than any winter can cleanse. You've started something at Wakefield that won't end until a generation of English nobility lies buried, and the crown your son inherits will be purchased with enough blood to fill the Thames. You ride south from Wakefield with an army drunk on victory and the metallic taste of blood still fresh in the winter air. Behind you, 2 heads rot on spikes above the castle gates, a grotesque Christmas decoration that announces to all of England that Lancaster has teeth and isn't afraid to use them. The snow crunches under your horse's hooves like breaking bones, each step carrying you further from the woman you used to be. Your son Edward rides beside you in a small cart wrapped in furs and blissfully unaware that his mother has just become the most feared woman in England. At 7 years old, he's more interested in the icicles hanging from tree branches than the political implications of the corpses you've left behind. His innocent laughter cuts through the grim satisfaction of your soldiers like sunlight through storm clouds. Lord Somerset approaches your horse, his face grim as a funeral mask. "Your Majesty," he says, his voice low enough that only you can hear. "We've received word from London. Edward of York has proclaimed himself king. He's calling himself Edward IV now, and half the nobles are flocking to his banner like moths to flame." The news hits you like a crossbow bolt to the chest, but you keep your face carefully neutral. York's eldest son has done exactly what you expected, turned his father's death into martyrdom, his brother's execution into a rallying cry. The boy you made an orphan at Wakefield has become a king, and England now has 2 monarchs claiming the same throne. Your breath creates small clouds in the frozen air as you consider your options. Each exhalation feels like releasing another piece of your former innocence into the winter sky. The French princess who arrived in England hoping to bring peace between nations is gone, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. A mother willing to burn kingdoms to protect her child's future. The army stretches behind you like a steel serpent winding through the Yorkshire landscape. These men have followed you into battle, cheered as you executed your enemies, sworn oaths that bind them to your cause with chains stronger than any metal. But loyalty purchased with blood has a way of demanding ever higher prices, and you can feel the weight of their expectations settling on your shoulders like snow. Your horse snorts and stamps, eager to keep moving despite the cold. The animal's breath steams in the air, making it look like a dragon from the stories your son loves. Dragons, you think with bitter amusement, are precisely what England needs right now, mythical beasts that devour their enemies and hoard gold like crowns. A messenger gallops up from the south, his horse foam-flecked and exhausted from hard riding. The man's face carries the particular pallor that comes with bearing terrible news, and your stomach tightens before he even opens his mouth. In war, messengers rarely bring tidings of victory. They're harbingers of fresh disasters, new problems that demand immediate solutions written in blood. "Your Majesty," the messenger gasps, sliding from his saddle, like a man who's ridden through hell itself. "London has declared for Edward of York. The city gates are closed to Lancaster forces. They're calling you—" He hesitates, earlier reluctant to deliver the message verbatim. "They're calling me what?" you ask, though you suspect you already know the answer. Popular opinion has never been kind to foreign queens, and executing popular nobles tends to make the commons nervous. The people of England are about to learn that their new reality involves choosing between 2 crowns, 2 armies, and 2 very different visions of what the kingdom should become. They're calling you the she-wolf of France, Your Majesty. They say you feed on English blood and teach your son to do the same. The messenger's words hang in the cold air like an accusation sharp enough to a cut. The nickname stings more than you expected, but you realise it's also strangely fitting. Wolves protect their young with savage devotion, and they hunt in packs that can bring down prey 10 times their size. If England wants to see you as a monster, perhaps it's time to embrace the role they've written for you. The nickname follows you south like a curse-made manifest, whispered in taverns and shouted from city walls by people who have never seen war but think they understand its necessity. She-wolf of France. The words taste bitter as the winter wine when you roll them around your tongue, but you're beginning to appreciate their accuracy. Wolves, after all, do whatever it takes to protect their pack. Your army has swollen to nearly 20,000 men, a steel river flowing through the English countryside toward London. They march under banners bearing the red rose of Lancaster, but you know they're really following something more primitive. The promise of plunder, the chance to be on the winning side of history, the simple animal pleasure of watching their enemies fall. The villages you pass are ghost towns, their inhabitants fled or hiding behind barred doors and shuttered windows. Smoke rises from abandoned hearths like prayers to gods who have stopped listening. and the few faces you glimpse in doorways look at your army with the particular terror reserved for approaching storms. Your son rides in his cart, wrapped in furs that make him look like a small king already. He's begun asking questions about the heads on spikes, about why people call his mother names, about when they can go home to a castle that isn't surrounded by armies. The innocence in his voice cuts deeper than any blade, reminding you that childhood is another casualty of this war you've chosen. Lord Clifford rides up beside you, his face flushed with the particular satisfaction that comes from successful violence. "The roads to London are clear, Your Majesty," he reports, his breath steaming in the cold air. "Edward of York's forces are still gathering. If we move quickly, we can take the city before he can mount a proper defence." The prospect of London burning sends a thrill through your chest like lightning through storm clouds. The city that rejected your husband's authority, that opened its gates to a usurper, that calls you monster. Soon it will kneel before the army you forged from necessity and rage. Victory, you're learning, has its own intoxicating flavour, sharp as wine and twice as addictive. But war has taught you to question good news as carefully as bad. Edward of York may be young, but he is not stupid, and he has something you lack, the support of the common people who see him as their rightful king. Your foreign birth, your husband's madness, your son's questionable legitimacy, these are weapons your enemies will use against you in ways that armies cannot. The winter landscape stretches endlessly around your marching host. White fields broken by bare trees that look like skeletons reaching toward an indifferent sky. Each mile brings you closer to London, closer to the confrontation that will determine whether your son grows up as a king or dies as a pretender's bastard. Your horse stumbles slightly on a patch of ice, and you steady yourself in the saddle with practiced ease. The near fall reminds you how precarious your position truly is. One wrong step, one tactical mistake, one moment of weakness, and everything you fought for will shatter like glass dropped on some stone. A scout gallops back from the vanguard, his face grim as midwinter twilight. "Your Majesty," he calls out while still approaching, "there's news from London. Edward of York has been formally crowned. The ceremony was yesterday in Westminster Abbey, with half the nobility in attendance." The words hit you like arrows finding their mark. While you've been marching south with dreams of victory, your enemy has been consolidating his claim with pageantry and politics. He's no longer just Edward of York, the boy whose father you executed. He's Edward IV, King of England by grace of God and popular acclaim. Your son looks up from his cart with curious eyes, not understanding the significance of what he's just heard. In his world, there's only one king, his father, and only one queen, his mother. The complexity of competing claims and rival coronations is beyond his 7-year-old comprehension, a political storm he's too young to weather. But you understand perfectly. England now has 2 crowned monarchs, 2 armies, and 2 incompatible visions of the future. The war that began with your refusal to surrender your son's birthright has transformed into something far more dangerous, a contest between legitimacy and popular will, between foreign queen and native king, between the old order you represent and the new world Edward embodies. The Second Battle of St. Albans unfolds like a fever dream painted in blood and snow. You watch from a hill overlooking the town as your army crashes into Edward's forces like a tide of steel and fury, the sound of clashing weapons echoing off the abbey walls where saints once prayed for peace. Today, the only prayers being answered are for victory at any cost. Your son sits beside you in his cart, his small hands clutching a wooden sword that suddenly seems more prophetic than playful. At 7, he's old enough to understand that the distant screams mean people are dying, but too young to grasp that they're dying for his right to wear a crown. His wide eyes reflect the flames rising from burning houses, innocent as a child's drawing of hell. Lord Warwick's forces, fighting for the newly crowned Edward IV, crumble before your assault like sandcastles before incoming tide. The man they call the Kingmaker has discovered that making kings is easier than keeping them alive, and his tactical genius means nothing when faced with the savage fury of soldiers who know their queen will reward victory and punish defeat with equal intensity. The battle rages through St. Albans' narrow streets, turning every alley into a slaughterhouse and every doorway into a potential tomb. Your soldiers fight with the desperate energy of men who know they're following a queen the rest of England calls monster, that defeat means more than political exile. It means the headsman's block for every man who dared support the she-wolf of France. Through the smoke and chaos, you catch glimpses of individual combats that look like scenes from illuminated manuscripts, knights in muddy armour trading sword blows, archers loosing arrows that sprout from wooden doors like deadly flowers, foot soldiers grappling in the snow with knives and desperation as their only weapons. A messenger struggles up the hill toward you, his surcoat torn and bloodied, his face bearing the particular exhaustion that comes from running through battlefields where every step might be your last. "Your Majesty," he gasps, dropping to one knee in the churned mud. "We've taken the town. Warwick's forces are in full retreat." The news tastes sweeter than honey wine, but you've learned to savour victory carefully. Battles won can be lost again, crowns gained can be stolen, and queens who celebrate too early often find themselves mourning their premature joy from prison cells or graves. Your horse shifts beneath you, sensing your tension despite your outward calm. The animal's nostrils flare at the smell of smoke and blood drifting up from the town below. Primitive instincts warning of danger, even in the moment of triumph. War, you've discovered, never truly ends. It just pauses between acts of violence like a play between scenes. "Bring me King Henry," you command, your voice carrying across the hillside like a blade through silk. Your husband, the rightful king, though his mind remains lost in shadows deeper than any dungeon, was captured by Warwick's forces and held like a prize of war. Today you'll reclaim him along with everything else that belongs to Lancaster. The irony isn't lost on you as they bring Henry up the hill. The man you've been fighting to restore looks like a prisoner of his own madness, his vacant eyes staring through you as if you're made of morning mist. He who should be commanding armies sits drooling in a cart while his wife leads charges and orders executions in his name. England's rightful king, ladies and gentlemen. A broken man who doesn't recognise his own crown. Your son Edward looks between you and his father, with a particular confusion of children trying to understand adult complexity. In storybooks, kings are wise and strong and always know exactly what to do. Reality, as your boy is learning, tends to be considerably more complicated and infinitely more tragic. "Father?" Edward asks tentatively, reaching toward the man who gave him life but can no longer remember his name. Henry's response is a vacant smile, the kind of empty pleasantness that madmen offer when they're trying to be polite to strangers. The victory at St. Albans is complete, but watching your husband fail to recognise his own child reminds you why you're fighting this war. It's not about crowns or politics or the abstract concept of legitimacy. It's about ensuring that a 7-year-old boy doesn't grow up knowing his birthright was stolen because his mother was too weak to fight for it. The she-wolf of France has won another battle, but the war stretches ahead like an endless winter, and you're beginning to understand that some victories cost more than defeats ever could. You stand in the great hall of St. Albans Abbey, surrounded by the spoils of victory that feel more like funeral offerings. The ancient stones witness your triumph while your son Edward plays with wooden soldiers near the fire, recreating battles he's too young to understand but old enough to fear. The irony burns bitter as medicinal wine. You've won everything and lost pieces of your soul you didn't know existed. Your husband Henry sits in his chair like a broken marionette, strings cut by whatever darkness lives in his mind. Occasionally he smiles at nothing, nods at invisible courtiers, speaks to ghosts only he can see. The King of England, ladies and gentlemen, rescued from his captors but still imprisoned by madness deeper than any dungeon. You fought a war to restore a man who doesn't remember why he needs restoring. Lord Somerset enters with news that tastes like poison wrapped in silk. "Your Majesty," he says, his voice carrying the particular exhaustion that comes from bearing impossible tidings. "Edward of York has won London completely. The merchants have opened their coffers, the guilds have sworn allegiance, and half the nobility who fled after St. Albans have rallied to his banner like moths to flame." The words settle in your stomach like stones thrown into deep water, sinking slowly but inevitably toward the bottom. While you've been celebrating tactical victories, your enemy has been winning the war of public opinion. Edward isn't just claiming the throne, he's earning it, one London merchant and one Yorkshire lord at a time. Your son looks up from his toy soldiers with the particular attention children give to adult conversations that might affect their world. His 7-year-old face carries worry lines that should belong to grown men. premature furrows carved by a war that's stolen his childhood, one battle at a time. He's learning that crowns aren't given, they're taken, held and defended with enough blood to fill cathedral fountains. The fire crackles in the hearth, sending shadows dancing across tapestries that depict saints performing miracles. You could use a miracle yourself, something to transform this Pyrrhic victory into lasting success. Instead, you're trapped in the ancient pattern of medieval warfare. Win a battle, lose supporters, advance toward power while retreat becomes inevitable. Outside, February wind howls like something hungry prowling around the abbey walls. Your army camps in the nearby fields. Their cooking fires creating a constellation of flickering lights that should feel comforting but instead reminds you of funeral pyres. These men have followed you into battle, cheered your victories, shared your dangers, and now they're beginning to whisper about the wisdom of following a foreign queen against a native king. A messenger arrives bearing news from the north that makes your blood run cold as winter streams. Your Majesty, the Scottish Queen has offered to assist your cause. She proposes an alliance, Scottish troops in exchange for the return of Berwick. The words hang in the air like a noose waiting for a neck. The political calculation is simple and poisonous. You need allies, Scotland needs English territory, and desperation makes strange bedfellows. But inviting Scottish soldiers into England will confirm every accusation your enemies have levelled, that you're foreign, disloyal, willing to sell English soil for personal power. The she-wolf of France is about to become the Scottish Queen's puppet. Your son abandons his toys and approaches your chair with the careful steps of a child who's learned that adult moods can shift like battlefield weather. "Mother," he asks in his clear young voice, "when can we go home?" The question cuts deeper than any blade, because home is exactly what you're fighting for, and exactly what seems to slip further away with each victory. You pull Edward onto your lap, feeling his small body against yours like an anchor in stormy seas. He smells like childhood innocence and wood smoke, and a combination that reminds you of everything this war is supposed to protect. His crown, his birthright, is worth any alliance, any sacrifice, any amount of English blood spilled on foreign altars. But as you hold your son and stare into the fire that throws dancing shadows on ancient walls, you can feel the shape of the future reshaping itself around your choices. The Scots will come south, bringing with them the final proof that Margaret of Anjou puts personal ambition above English interests. Victory at St. Albans will be remembered not as triumph, but as the moment when desperation forced a queen to sell her adopted country's soul. The wooden soldiers scattered on the floor seem to watch you with painted eyes, toy warriors in a child's game that mirrors the deadly chess match consuming England. Your next move will determine whether your son grows up as king or dies as history's footnote, whether the she-wolf of France becomes England's saviour or its greatest traitor. You meet the Scottish emissaries in a draughty chamber that smells like old prayers and newer conspiracies, while outside the February wind carries rumours that spread faster than plague through medieval England. The Scots sit across from you like predators offering partnership to prey, their faces bearing the particular satisfaction of neighbours about to profit from family quarrels. Sir James Hamilton speaks for the Scottish delegation, his accent thick as porridge and twice as hard to swallow. "Her Majesty Queen Mary offers 10,000 men," he says, spreading a map across the table like a merchant displaying valuable silk. "Good Scottish steel, Your Majesty, proven in border wars and ready to march south within the fortnight." The price hangs unspoken between you like smoke from a funeral pyre. Berwick-upon-Tweed, that contested border town that's changed hands more often than a tavern wench's apron, will return to Scottish control. English soil traded for Scottish swords, your son's kingdom mortgaged to foreign armies. The irony tastes bitter as wormwood tea, fighting to preserve English crown by selling English territory. Your son Edward sits in the corner, supposedly playing with his wooden knights, but actually listening with the acute attention children develop when adult conversations might reshape their world. His small face shows the worry lines that no 7-year-old should wear. Premature wisdom carved by a war that's stolen his innocence one political calculation at a time. Lord Somerset shifts uncomfortably in his chair, the leather creaking like old bones. His loyalty to Lancaster runs deeper than blood, but even he understands the implications of Scottish intervention. "Your Majesty," he ventures carefully, "perhaps we should consider the political ramifications of foreign assistance." political ramifications. The phrase sounds so clean, so diplomatic, so utterly divorced from the reality of what you're contemplating. When Scottish soldiers march into England bearing your banners, every accusation your enemies have made will crystallise into undeniable truth. The French queen who invited foreign invasion, the she-wolf who sold English soil for personal power, the fire in the chamber spits and hisses, casting dancing shadows that make the Scottish emissaries look like devils negotiating for souls. Outside, your English soldiers sharpen weapons and mend armour, unaware that their queen is about to ally with the same neighbours they've spent generations fighting. Border raids and cattle theft have been replaced by grand strategy, but the essential transaction remains unchanged. Scots taking English things because they can. Hamilton leans forward, his smile sharp as a dirk blade. "Time grows short, your majesty. Edward of York gathers strength like a summer storm. Each day you hesitate, more English lords declare for him. Our offer stands, but not indefinitely. The threat wraps itself in diplomatic silk, but you recognise extortion when it stares you in the face. Scotland isn't offering alliance, it's offering rescues at the price of national humiliation. Your crown will be preserved by foreign intervention that proves you unfit to wear it. Your son's birthright secured through deals that make it worthless. But what choice remains? Edward of York commands London, controls the treasury, and enjoys the support of merchants who see him as England's native son reclaiming his throne from foreign usurpers. Your victory at St Albans feels increasingly like a tactical success in a strategically lost campaign. One bright moment before the darkness closes in, your husband Henry chooses this moment to speak, his voice carrying the dreamy quality of someone commenting on weather in another season. "The roses," he says, staring at nothing with vacant eyes. "They're all red now. Strange how flowers change colour when you're not watching." The words hang in the chamber like prophecy spoken by accident, madness revealing truth that sanity conceals. Red roses, Lancaster's symbol, your family's emblem, your son's heritage. But roses change colour when gardens change hands, when new gardeners decide which flowers deserve to bloom. Hamilton watches this display of royal madness with the interested detachment of a buyer evaluating damaged goods. Here sits the King of England, the man whose cause you're defending, reduced to botanical observations that make more sense than his political situation. The Scots see exactly what they're being asked to restore: a broken crown worn by a broken man, defended by a foreign woman who's running out of English allies. Your decision crystallises like ice forming on winter windows, clear and inevitable and cold as charity. 10,000 men, you say. Your voice carrying across the chamber like a judge pronouncing sentence. When can they march? The die is cast, the deal struck, the future mortgaged for present necessity. Your son will keep his crown, but the kingdom he inherits will be smaller, poorer, stained by the knowledge that his mother bought Scottish steel with English soil. The Scottish army arrives like a plague of locusts dressed in mail and carrying sharp things, 10,000 men who look at English countryside with the acquisitive eyes of tourists planning extended stays. You watch them make camp outside St Albans from your chamber window, their fires creating a constellation of flickering lights that should feel comforting, but instead reminds you of invasion barely disguised as assistance. Your son Edward presses his face against the cold glass, his breath fogging the window as he stares at the foreign soldiers who've come to fight for his crown. "They look different from our men, mother," he observes with the clinical honesty of childhood. "Their weapons are strange, and they talk funny." Strange weapons and funny talking. If only the political implications were so simple. These Scottish soldiers represent everything your enemies have accused you of being. Foreign influence, divided loyalty, the Queen who values personal power over English interests. Each tartan banner in that camp is evidence for Edward of York's claim that Margaret of Anjou serves Scotland's interests rather than England's. Lord Clifford enters your chamber with the news that tastes like victory poisoned with necessity. Your Majesty, the Scottish commanders request immediate payment. They want half their gold now, half after victory. And they're asking about additional compensation for services beyond simple warfare. Additional compensation. The phrase settles in your stomach like swallowed glass, sharp and uncomfortable and impossible to digest. You know exactly what the Scots are requesting: permission to plunder, the right to take whatever they can carry from the English countryside they're supposedly protecting. Your allies want to be paid for their assistance with your subjects' property. The irony burns bitter as medicine brewed from tree bark. You're hiring foreign soldiers to preserve English crown, paying them with English gold to fight English battles, and granting them permission to steal English goods as bonus compensation. The she-wolf of France has become a broker of national humiliation, trading sovereignty for survival one painful compromise at a time. Your husband Henry sits by the fire, building small towers from kindling wood with the intense concentration of someone whose mind has found refuge in simple tasks. Occasionally he glances toward the window where Scottish campfires flicker like fallen stars, and his vacant expression suggests he understands more than madness should allow. "Foreign fires burn differently," he mutters, knocking down his wooden tower. "They consume things that don't belong to them." The observation cuts deeper than any political analysis, madness revealing truths that sanity prefers to ignore. Henry sees what you've done: invited consumption disguised as assistance, welcomed wolves dressed as sheepdogs into the fold. His broken mind grasps the essential transaction better than your careful diplomatic reasoning. Outside, the February wind carries sounds from the Scottish camp that make your English soldiers nervous. Foreign accents, unfamiliar songs, the particular laughter of men who know they're fighting someone else's war for profit rather than principle. Your own troops whisper around their fires, wondering if their queen trusts Scottish steel more than English loyalty. A messenger arrives with reports from London that make your blood run cold as cathedral stone. "Your Majesty," the man gasps, still mud-splattered from hard riding. "Edward of York has proclaimed your alliance with Scotland as proof of treason. He's calling for all loyal Englishmen to defend their homeland against foreign invasion. The response..." He swallows hard. "The response has been significant." Significant response. More lords declaring for Edward, more merchants opening their coffers for the native king, more common soldiers choosing the English pretender over the foreign queen and her Scottish mercenaries. Your desperate alliance has handed your enemy the perfect weapon: patriotism sharpened by xenophobia, nationalism painted as necessity. Your son abandons the window and approaches your chair with the careful steps of a child navigating adult emotions too complex for his 7-year-old understanding. "Mother," he asks with devastating innocence, "why do the Scottish men fight for us if we're English? Don't they have their own kings to serve?" The question cuts through political necessity to reach essential truth. These men aren't fighting for England or Lancaster or your son's legitimate claim to the throne. They're fighting for gold and plunder and the chance to settle old scores against English neighbours. Your crown will be preserved by mercenaries whose loyalty extends only as far as their next payment. But what choice remains? Edward of York grows stronger with each passing day. Your English support erodes like riverbank in spring flood, and your son's birthright hangs by threads, thinner than spider silk. The Scottish alliance may damn you in history's judgment, but defeat would damn you in God's, and between political humiliation and personal extinction, the choice writes itself in blood and gold. The wooden towers by the fire collapse again, scattered kindling that looks like the remains of careful plans destroyed by careless hands. Your husband builds and destroys, creating and ruining with the same vacant persistence that mirrors your own political situation. You stand in the courtyard of Sandal Castle watching your Scottish allies celebrate victory with the enthusiasm of wolves feasting on fresh carrion, and the taste of triumph turns bitter as medicine in your mouth. The Battle of Towton, if you can call such systematic slaughter a battle, has ended with English dead scattered across the Yorkshire countryside like grain after a failed harvest. The snow falls steadily, covering the bloodstains with merciful white silence, but nothing can hide the reality of what's just transpired. 28,000 men lie dead or dying in the fields around you, the largest single-day loss of life in English history, all because 2 women, you and your enemy, refused to let their children surrender their claims to the same throne. Your son Edward, now 8 years old and far too familiar with the sight of corpses, picks his way through the aftermath with the careful steps of someone who's learned that battlefields are gardens where death blooms in abundance. His small face carries the particular paleness that comes from witnessing adult violence, premature wisdom carved by war into features still soft with childhood. The Scottish commanders approach with their helmets tucked under arms like trophies, their faces bearing the satisfied expressions of merchants who've just concluded profitable transactions. Sir James Hamilton's surcoat is splattered with English blood. Whether from enemy or ally you no longer care to distinguish. Victory has its own moral mathematics, and subtraction seems to be the only operation that matters. Your Majesty, Hamilton reports with the businesslike tone of someone discussing livestock prices, Edward of York's army is completely scattered. Those who survived are fleeing south faster than rabbits with their tails on fire. The Pretender himself escaped, but barely, and empty-handed. Empty-handed. The phrase should taste sweet, but instead it sits in your stomach like undigested meat. Edward of York may have lost this battle, but he's retained something more valuable than tactical victory, his reputation as England's native son fighting foreign invasion. Your triumph at Towton proves your military competence while simultaneously demonstrating your moral failure. Lord Somerset limps toward you, his left arm hanging useless at his side, his face pale as a morning frost. Blood seeps through the bandages wrapped around his shoulder, each drop a reminder that victory costs more than defeat ever charged. "Your Majesty," he gasps, leaning heavily against a wooden post. "The men are asking about prisoners. What are your orders?" Prisoners. The word hangs in the cold air like smoke from funeral pyres, heavy with implication and sharp with necessity. Medieval warfare traditionally includes ransom, negotiation, the civilized exchange of captured nobility for gold and political advantage. But civil wars operate by different mathematics. Mercy becomes luxury that few queens can afford. Your breath creates small clouds as you survey the aftermath, each exhalation like releasing another piece of innocence into the winter sky. The soldiers who fought against you aren't foreign invaders or mercenary raiders. They're Englishmen who chose the wrong king, neighbours who backed the losing side, fathers and sons and brothers whose only crime was political miscalculation. But political miscalculation in wartime carries fatal penalties. Every man you spare is a potential enemy who might fight you again. Every noble you ransom is a resource that strengthens opposition. Every mercy you show is perceived as weakness by allies who have invested their own blood in your cause. The Scottish soldiers watch your deliberation with the patient interest of predators, waiting to see if their hunting partner has sufficient ruthlessness. Your husband Henry sits on a makeshift throne constructed from broken wagon wheels and salvaged cushions, his vacant eyes staring at the falling snow with the serene detachment of someone watching weather in another season. Occasionally he nods at invisible courtiers, smiles at distant music, speaks to ghosts that populate his private madness. The King of England, ladies and gentlemen, restored to his throne by foreign swords and Scottish gold. A young Yorkshire lord, barely older than your son, but already bearing wounds that will scar him for life, is brought before you in chains that clank like funeral bells. His blue eyes carry the particular defiance of defeated nobility, the stubborn pride that refuses to beg even when death looms like winter storm. He represents everything you're fighting against. English resistance to foreign rule, native loyalty to usurper kings, the persistent belief that crowns should be earned rather than inherited. "Your Majesty," the Scottish captain holding his chain says with casual efficiency, "this one claims to be related to Edward of York. Distant cousin, maybe worth ransom? What's your pleasure?" Your pleasure. The phrase sounds obscene when applied to deciding whether teenagers live or die, but war has its own vocabulary of euphemism and necessity. This boy's distant royal blood makes him valuable enough to negotiate with, dangerous enough to execute, young enough to potentially switch sides if properly motivated. Your son watches this drama unfold with the intense attention children give to adult decisions that might reshape their understanding of right and wrong. His 8-year-old mind is processing lessons about power, mercy, and the price of wearing crowns that no child should need to learn. The young Yorkshire lord's execution unfolds with the efficient brutality of medieval justice, his head separating from his shoulders with a wet sound like an axe, splitting green wood. And you feel something fundamental shift in your chest like ice cracking under unexpected weight. His blood steams in the cold air, creating small clouds that dissipate into the falling snow like prayers no god bothers to answer. Your Scottish allies cheer the beheading with the enthusiasm of spectators at particularly entertaining theatre, their voices echoing off castle walls that have witnessed centuries of similar performances. Violence, you've learned, becomes routine when survival depends on demonstrating sufficient ruthlessness to discourage future challenges. Medieval politics runs on simple mathematics. Subtract your enemies before they can subtract you. Your son Edward turns away from the execution with a speed that suggests his innocence is finally beginning to crack like ice on ponds in early spring. 8 years old, and already he's learning that crowns are paid for in instalments of blood, that mercy is a luxury kings cannot afford, that mothers sometimes make choices that stain souls permanently black. Lord Somerset approaches with news that tastes like victory wrapped in thorns. "Your Majesty," he reports, his wounded arm cradled against his chest like a broken promise. Scouts report that Edward of York has reached London. The city opened its gates immediately, and he's calling for Parliament to formally recognise his claim. London. Always London. The city that determines English politics like Rome once controlled Mediterranean destiny, opening its gates to whoever commands sufficient force to seem inevitable. Your enemy may have lost the Battle of Towton, but he's winning the war of legitimacy one parliamentary decree at a time. The irony burns bitter, as a medicine brewed from tree bark and desperation. You control the battlefield, command the armies, hold the rightful king and his designated heir, but your enemy controls the capital, the treasury, and most importantly the narrative. History isn't written by victors alone, it's composed by whoever survives long enough to explain why their violence was necessary. Your husband Henry chooses this moment to speak, his voice carrying the dreamy quality of someone commenting on weather in distant countries. "The snow tastes different here," he says, catching flakes on his tongue like a child discovering winter for the first time. "It remembers the blood, I think. Everything remembers blood." The observation cuts deeper than political analysis, madness revealing truths that sanity prefers to ignore. This battlefield will remember today's slaughter long after spring melts the snow, long after grass grows over graves, long after historians decide which side deserved to win. Violence leaves marks that time struggles to heal. The Scottish commanders huddle around their maps like vultures dividing carrion, their fingers tracing roads toward London, with the acquisitive enthusiasm of merchants planning profitable raids. They've fulfilled their contract, delivered military victory, in exchange for gold and territorial concessions, but now they're calculating additional profits from English misfortune. "Your Majesty," Sir James Hamilton approaches with the careful deference of someone delivering unwelcome news. "Our agreement specified payment after victory. The battle is won, but the war continues. If you require our services for the march on London..." The sentence hangs unfinished, but the implication echoes clear as cathedral bells tolling for the dead. More battles require more gold, additional victories demand additional payment, and Scottish loyalty extends only as far as English coffers can sustain. Your allies are business partners, not blood relatives, and partnerships require constant renegotiation. Your son tugs at your sleeve with the insistent urgency of children who've reached the limits of their patience. "Mother," he whispers, his voice barely audible above the wind. "When can we go home? I don't like it here. Everything smells like dying." Everything smells like dying. The observation contains more strategic wisdom than most military councils produce. 8-year-old honesty cutting through adult justification to reach essential truth. This war you've fought to preserve his birthright has transformed England into a charnel house, where victory and defeat measure themselves in corpses per acre. But home is exactly what you're fighting for. His right to inherit the throne his father wore before madness made him unsuitable for anything except symbolic authority. Every dead Yorkist in these fields represents one less enemy threatening your child's future. Every execution demonstrates resolve necessary to maintain power. Every alliance purchases time your family desperately needs. The snow continues falling like tears from heaven, each flake a tiny witness to the transformation of English countryside into graveyard. Your enemies lie scattered across Yorkshire fields while your allies count gold and plan additional campaigns. And somewhere between victory and its price, you've become something your younger self wouldn't recognise. The she-wolf of France has evolved into something more dangerous. A mother who's learned that love sometimes requires atrocities, that protecting innocence demands destroying it in others, that wearing crowns means accepting damnation as occupational hazard. You enter York's cathedral through doors that creak like the gates of purgatory, your footsteps echoing off ancient stones that have witnessed centuries of kings seeking divine approval for earthly ambitions. The Scottish victory at Towton has cleared the path to your husband's restoration, but divine blessings feel increasingly theoretical when purchased with foreign gold and English blood. The ceremony unfolds with all the pomp medieval Christianity can muster when pressed into service for political theatre. Henry sits on the throne they've dragged from Westminster, his vacant eyes staring at stained glass windows that filter winter sunlight into colours too beautiful for the occasion. Your husband wears his crown like a man modelling clothing that no longer fits, regal vestments draped over broken majesty. Your son Edward kneels beside the throne in miniature royal robes that make him look like a child playing dress-up in adult ceremonies, his 8-year-old face solemn with the weight of expectations he's too young to fully comprehend. The boy who should inherit this crown has learned more about death and politics than any prince should need to know before his 10th birthday. The Archbishop of York performs the restoration rites with the enthusiasm of someone reading funeral services for his own career, his voice carrying the particular reluctance of clergy forced to bless questionable political arrangements. Divine right of kings becomes complicated when kings require foreign armies to exercise their divinely ordained authority. Scottish soldiers line the cathedral walls like armed decorations, their presence transforming religious ceremony into military occupation barely disguised as celebration. These men have fought to restore English crown, but their foreign faces and unfamiliar accents remind everyone present that legitimacy sometimes requires assistance that undermines the very thing it's meant to preserve. Lord Somerset approaches the throne with news that should taste sweet, but instead sits bitter as wormwood on your tongue. "Your Majesty," he whispers, leaning close enough that his words don't carry beyond royal ears. "Edward of York has proclaimed your restoration illegal, calling it foreign conquest disguised as rightful succession. London remains closed to us." London remains closed. The phrase echoes through the cathedral like funeral bells, each word as a reminder that controlling Yorkshire doesn't equal ruling England. Your husband may wear his crown again, but half the kingdom refuses to acknowledge his authority, and the capital treats him like a foreign pretender supported by Scottish gold. The irony burns sharp as winter wind through cathedral stones. You've won every battle, defeated every army, restored the rightful king to his throne, and somehow made him appear less legitimate than the usurper you fought. Victory has transformed into something that looks suspiciously like sophisticated defeat, success that undermines its own foundations. Your husband chooses this moment to speak, his voice carrying across the cathedral with the clarity that madness occasionally provides. "Do you hear them singing?" he asks, tilting his head toward the sounds only he perceives. The angels are singing, but it's not a happy song. They're singing about endings, about things that can't be restored once they're broken. The words hit like prophecy delivered by accident, divine insight channeled through royal madness to reveal truths that sanity conceals. Angels singing about endings, perhaps they're mourning the death of legitimate monarchy in England, the transformation of divine right into something that requires foreign armies to make it real. The Scottish commanders stand at the back of the cathedral like wedding guests who've crashed someone else's ceremony, their faces bearing the satisfied expressions of merchants who have concluded profitable transactions. They've delivered on their contract, restored Lancaster to power in exchange for gold and territorial concessions, but their presence transforms a restoration into something that looks remarkably like conquest. Your son glances between the throne where his father sits and the foreign soldiers who guard the cathedral, his young mind processing contradictions that adult politics struggles to explain. His inheritance includes a crown maintained by Scottish steel, a kingdom divided between competing legitimacies, and a future mortgaged against foreign assistance that may prove more costly than defeat. The ceremony concludes with Te Deums that echo off stone walls like prayers seeking destinations they'll never reach. Henry III sits restored to his throne. Your son kneels as his recognised heir, and you stand as the queen who made it all possible. but the victory tastes like ashes mixed with honey, sweet triumph poisoned by bitter necessity. Outside the cathedral, Yorkshire snow continues falling, on the battlefields where 28,000 Englishmen lie dead, their sacrifice purchasing restoration that feels increasingly like sophisticated surrender. The she-wolf of France has achieved everything she set out to accomplish, and the success threatens to destroy the very thing she fought to preserve. You stand in the ruins of Hexham Castle watching smoke rise from what used to be English villages, and the taste of Scottish assistance has turned bitter, as medicine brewed from poisonous herbs. 6 months after your husband's restoration, your allies have begun collecting payment with interest compounded by greed, and the countryside burns like a funeral pyre for England's lost sovereignty. The Scottish soldiers who fought to restore Lancaster now ravage Northumberland with the systematic efficiency of professional reapers harvesting crops they've planted in other men's fields. Every farmhouse they torch, every merchant they rob, every daughter they violate becomes evidence for Edward of York's claim that Margaret of Anjou serves foreign masters rather than English interests. Your son Edward, now 9 and wise beyond his years in the mathematics of survival, watches the destruction with eyes that have learned to calculate the political cost of moral compromise. "Mother," he asks with devastating innocence, "why are our allies burning English homes? I thought we were fighting to protect England." Protecting England. The phrase tastes like irony wrapped in necessity, sweet justification poisoned by bitter reality. You invited these wolves to preserve your child's birthright, but wolves follow their nature regardless of diplomatic agreements, and Scottish nature includes centuries of profitable raids across English borders. Lord Clifford approaches with reports that make your blood run cold as winter streams. His face bears the particular exhaustion that comes from witnessing systematic destruction he's powerless to prevent. "Your Majesty," he says, his voice hollow as empty armour. The Scottish commanders claim they're collecting legitimate war reparations. They say English resistance justifies enhanced taxation. Enhanced taxation? Your allies aren't soldiers anymore. They're debt collectors with swords pursuing payment through methods that would make Viking raiders blush with embarrassment. The smoke from burning villages creates a haze that turns the sun blood red, an appropriate colour for what your alliance has cost. Each column of black smoke represents families destroyed, livelihoods eliminated, children orphaned by the foreign assistance you bought with English gold and Scottish promises. The she-wolf of France has become the broker of national humiliation. Your husband Henry sits in his portable throne, watching the destruction with the serene detachment of someone observing weather in distant countries. Occasionally he nods at invisible courtiers, smiles at private jokes, speaks to spirits that populate his broken mind. The landscape is changing, he observes with accidental wisdom. Everything that was green is turning black. Strange how fire makes things disappear. Fire makes things disappear. Your husband's madness has stumbled onto essential truth. This war hasn't just changed who wears England's crown, it's transformed the very nature of what that crown represents. Royal authority now depends on foreign soldiers who collect their wages from English suffering, and legitimacy requires allies whose loyalty extends only to profitable horizons. A messenger arrives with news from London that should lift your spirits, but instead weighs on them like lead vestments. "Your Majesty," the man reports, still mud-splattered from hard riding, "Edward of York has called for a great council. He's offering pardons to any lords who abandon your cause, promising restoration of all land seized by Scottish forces." Pardons and restoration. Edward isn't just offering political amnesty. He's providing practical solutions to problems your alliance created. Every English lord watching Scottish soldiers burn English villages understands that supporting the she-wolf means accepting foreign occupation, while supporting Edward means restoring native rule and ending the raids. The political mathematics write themselves in smoke and blood across the Northumberland landscape. Your tactical victories have achieved strategic disaster. Your foreign allies have become domestic enemies, and your son's crown rests on foundations that crumble with each village burned in his name. Scottish laughter echoes from the camp below, where soldiers count English gold and English goods with equal enthusiasm. They've fulfilled their contract by restoring Lancaster to power, but contracts written in desperation tend to favour the desperate party's creditors, and Scottish creditors have developed expensive tastes. Your son tugs at your sleeve with the insistent urgency of children who have reached the limits of their patience with adult failures. "Mother," he whispers, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Can't we make them stop? Can't we tell our allies to go home? Tell our allies to go home. If only political relationships terminated as easily as childhood friendships. If only alliances dissolved through polite requests rather than military necessity. The Scots won't leave until they've collected everything they consider owed, and they consider themselves owed everything England can provide. But telling allies to go home requires having alternative sources of military support, and your English nobility has begun calculating whether supporting a foreign queen's Scottish allies serves their interests better than supporting a native king's English patriots. The mathematics of medieval loyalty always favour the side that promises more plunder with less moral compromise. The news arrives with the messenger, who looks like he's ridden through hell and emerged with his horse on fire, his face bearing the particular pallor that comes from witnessing the impossible becoming inevitable. Lord Somerset is dead, cut down at the Battle of Hexham while trying to protect villages from the Scottish allies you brought to save England from itself. The irony burns bitter as medicine mixed with tears. Somerset, who stood by Lancaster through every defeat and moral compromise, has died fighting the very soldiers he helped invite into England. Your most loyal English lord killed by your most necessary foreign allies. Medieval politics writing its own epitaph in blood that flows from friends as readily as enemies. Your son Edward stands beside the messenger with his small hands clenched into fists that should be holding toys instead of processing adult grief. At 9 years old, he understands that Lord Somerset represented something irreplaceable. English loyalty to Lancaster cause, native nobility willing to die for foreign queen's native rights, the last connection between your family and the land you claim to rule. How did he die, you ask, though you suspect the answer will provide no comfort. Medieval battles rarely offer heroic deaths, just violent endings that serve no purpose, except proving that steel cuts flesh, regardless of the flesh's political affiliations. The messenger swallows hard, choosing his words, like a man walking through brambles. "Fighting to defend Hexham village from Scottish raiders, your majesty. He said he wouldn't let English children burn for foreign gold. The Scots cut him down when he refused to stand aside." English children burning for foreign gold. Somerset's final words contain more political wisdom than most royal councils produce, dying nobility speaking truths that living diplomacy prefers to obscure. Your alliance with Scotland has transformed from military necessity into moral catastrophe, and the last lord willing to die for Lancaster has died fighting Lancaster's allies. Your husband Henry chooses this moment to demonstrate his peculiar gift for accidental insight. "The roses are all thorns now," he observes, staring at nothing with his vacant eyes. "Red roses, white roses, they both draw blood when you try to pick them. Strange how flowers learn to protect themselves by hurting people." Roses learning to protect themselves by hurting people. Madness has stumbled onto metaphorical truth. Your red rose of Lancaster has grown thorns that wound everyone who tries to support it, while Edward's white rose of York promises native rule without foreign complications. England faces a choice between poisonous flowers and increasingly prefers the poison that tastes like home. The Scottish commanders approach with the business-like demeanour of debt collectors presenting final invoices, their faces bearing the satisfied expressions of merchants who've successfully concluded complex negotiations. Sir James Hamilton carries a scroll that probably contains demands dressed as diplomatic requirements, another mortgage against English sovereignty. "Your Majesty," Hamilton begins with practiced diplomacy that barely conceals underlying threat. "Our forces have successfully restored order to the northern counties. However, maintaining this order requires ongoing investment in regional security. We estimate another year's campaign should stabilise the situation permanently." Another year's campaign. The euphemism tastes like diplomatic poison, pretty language that transforms continued occupation into administrative necessity. The Scots want to extend their profitable raid indefinitely, collecting English wealth while claiming to preserve English crown, transforming temporary alliance into permanent dependency. Your son watches this negotiation with the intense attention children give to adult decisions that might reshape their understanding of right and wrong. His 9-year-old mind is processing lessons about the difference between allies and parasites, between military assistance and economic exploitation, between crowns worth wearing and crowns that cost more than kingdoms. But what alternatives remain? Somerset's death has eliminated your last reliable English supporter. Edward of York's pardons are drawing lords away from your cause like honey attracts flies, and London remains closed to Lancaster despite your tactical victories. Scotland offers the only military force willing to fight for your son's crown, regardless of that force's impact on the kingdom he's supposed to inherit. The smoke from burning English villages continues rising like incense offered to gods who have stopped caring about mortal politics, each column a reminder that your crown rests on foundations of ash and foreign steel. The she-wolf of France has preserved her child's birthright by mortgaging his inheritance, saved the monarchy by making it dependent on neighbours who view English suffering as profitable entertainment. Your reflection in the castle window shows a woman who looks older than her 37 years, her face marked by lines that come from making impossible choices between different varieties of damnation. The French princess who arrived in England hoping to bring peace between nations is gone, replaced by something harder and more desperate. A mother who's learned that love sometimes requires embracing everything she once found morally repugnant. The messenger delivers his final piece of news like a funeral director presenting the bill for elaborate obsequies. Your Majesty, Edward of York, has proclaimed that any lord who submits before Michaelmas will receive full pardons and restoration of all properties. After Michaelmas, he doesn't need to finish the sentence. After Michaelmas comes winter, and winter in medieval politics means no more campaigning, no more opportunities for military solutions, no more chances to change the outcome through force of arms. Your enemy is offering limited-time amnesty to lords who abandon your cause, while your allies demand extended contracts that transform the temporary assistance into permanent occupation. The summons arrives with the pre-dawn darkness that carries news too terrible for daylight, and you know before breaking the seal that your war has reached its final equation. Edward of York, now Edward IV in more than just his own proclamation, has landed in England with French support, Burgundian gold, and most importantly English lords who've grown tired of Scottish solutions to English problems. Your son Edward, now 10 years old and wise beyond his years in the mathematics of political survival, sits beside your bed as you read the dispatch by candlelight. His face bears the particular paleness that comes from understanding that childhood ends when mothers receive messages that make their hands shake. "Mother," he asks with devastating clarity, "are we going to lose? Are we going to lose?" The question hangs in the pre-dawn darkness like smoke from funeral pyres, heavy with implications that extend far beyond military defeat. Losing means more than surrendering crowns. It means executions for treason, exile to foreign courts, your son growing up knowing his birthright was stolen because his mother chose the wrong allies at the wrong time. The message details Edward of York's landing with clinical precision that makes your blood run cold as cathedral stone. 15,000 men, mostly English exiles, eager to reclaim confiscated property, supported by French gold that makes your Scottish alliance look like provincial bargaining. Your enemy has learned from your example. Foreign assistance works, but French assistance carries fewer moral complications than Scottish occupation. Your husband Henry demonstrates his gift for accidental wisdom, speaking to the pre-dawn shadows with the clarity that madness occasionally provides. "The numbers don't add up anymore," he observes, staring at nothing with his vacant eyes. "Too many subtractions, not enough additions. Mathematics becomes impossible when you run out of things to count." Running out of things to count. Your husband's broken mind has grasped essential truth. This war has consumed everything you brought to it. English supporters dead or fled, Scottish allies grown into occupying army, treasury exhausted by purchasing loyalty that evaporates at the first better offer, and now your son's inheritance reduced to whatever foreign courts might offer political refugees. The Scottish commanders arrive with the punctuality of debt collectors, presenting final invoices, their faces bearing expressions that merchants wear when profitable relationships approach natural termination. Sir James Hamilton carries himself with the satisfied air of someone who's successfully concluded complex negotiations and extracted maximum value from diminishing assets. "Your Majesty," Hamilton begins with diplomatic courtesy that barely conceals underlying dismissal, "our intelligence suggests that Edward of York commands significant support. Under these circumstances, continued operations may prove financially challenging. Perhaps it's time to consider strategic repositioning." Strategic repositioning. The euphemism tastes like diplomatic poison wrapped in silk, pretty language that transforms abandonment into administrative policy. The Scots have extracted everything valuable from their English intervention, and now plan to withdraw with their profits before supporting the losing side becomes expensive rather than profitable. Your son watches this diplomatic theatre with the intense attention children give to adult decisions that will reshape their entire world. His 10-year-old mind is processing lessons about the difference between allies and business partners, between loyalty and contracts, between promises made in desperation and obligations fulfilled in prosperity. Lord Clifford, one of your last remaining English supporters, approaches with news that should surprise you, but instead feels inevitable as winter following autumn. "Your Majesty," he reports, his voice hollow, as empty armour. "Half our remaining lords have accepted Edward's pardons. They cite concerns about Scottish administration of recovered territories." Scottish administration. Another euphemism for occupation, pillage, and the systematic transformation of English countryside into profitable wasteland. Your allies' methods of collecting payment have provided Edward with perfect propaganda. Every burned village proves that Lancaster serves foreign interests. Every Scottish raid demonstrates that Edward represents native resistance to foreign domination. The candle beside your bed flickers in some invisible draught, shadows dancing across stone walls like ghosts of all the choices that led to this moment. You invited Scottish assistance to preserve your son's crown, but Scottish assistance has made that crown unwearable for any monarch who claims to serve English interests. Victory through foreign alliance has become indistinguishable from sophisticated defeat. But surrendering means more than admitting tactical failure. It means accepting that your 10-year-old son will grow up knowing his mother chose Scottish gold over English loyalty, foreign armies over native allegiance, temporary military success over lasting political legitimacy. The she-wolf of France faces her final calculation between personal survival and historical judgment. Your reflection in the dark window shows a woman who looks ancient despite her 38 years, her face marked by lines that come from 10 years of impossible choices between different varieties of moral compromise. The French princess who married for peace has become the English queen who brought war, and now the mathematics of survival demand one final calculation. The dawn breaks grey and cold over Hexham, painting the sky the colour of old pewter and forgotten hopes. Your son stands at your side, no longer the child who played with wooden knights while his mother plotted kingdoms. At 10, he understands that today will determine whether he grows up as a king in exile or dies as a traitor's son on English soil. "Mother," he says with the terrible clarity that comes from witnessing too much history too young. "Lord Clifford says we should flee to Scotland. He says the French court would welcome us." His voice carries no excitement about foreign courts, no childish enthusiasm for adventure. He knows that exile tastes like permanent defeat seasoned with others' charity. Flee to Scotland. The irony burns sharper than winter wind through broken shutters. The allies who helped you win battles have made victory indistinguishable from surrender, their assistance transforming your cause into something that requires constant flight from the kingdom you claim to rule. The she-wolf of France faces her final metamorphosis, from queen to refugee. The Scottish commanders approach for the last time, their faces bearing the professional courtesy that undertakers show grieving families. Sir James Hamilton carries documents that probably detail withdrawal schedules and final payment requirements, the administrative conclusion to England's most expensive political experiment. "Your Majesty, Sir," Hamilton begins with the diplomatic precision of someone terminating contracts. "Our intelligence suggests that continued operations face insurmountable obstacles. Under these circumstances, strategic withdrawal seems advisable. Scotland stands ready to provide appropriate accommodation for distinguished guests." Distinguished guests. The euphemism tastes like charity dressed as diplomacy, foreign hospitality that transforms queens into pensioners dependent on others' generosity. Your crown will be preserved in Scottish courts like a museum piece, honoured but powerless, remembered but irrelevant. Your husband Henry speaks from his portable throne with the accidental wisdom that madness sometimes provides. The game is ending, oh dear. Watching shadows move across the courtyard like pieces on an invisible chessboard. All the kings and queens go back in the same box when the game is over. Strange how playing doesn't change the ending. All the kings and queens go back in the same box. Your husband's broken mind has grasped essential truth about monarchy. Crowns are temporary, but the boxes that hold them are permanent. Whether you rule England or live in Scottish exile, time reduces all ambitions to the same final destination. The sound of approaching hoofbeats echoes across the castle courtyard like funeral drums, and you know without looking that Edward of York's advance scouts have found you. The boy whose father you executed at Wakefield has become the king whose mercy you'll need to survive, and the mathematics of that transaction write themselves in blood across 10 years of accumulated hatred. Your son takes your hand with the fierce grip of someone who understands that some moments pivot entire lifetimes. His palm is warm against yours, small fingers intertwined with larger ones in a gesture that says more about love than any crown could communicate. Whatever happens next, you fought for him with everything medieval queenship could command. The final messenger of your reign arrives breathless and mud-splattered, his face bearing news that should terrify but instead feels inevitable as winter following autumn. "Your Majesty," he gasps, "Edward's army is less than an hour away. He offers safe passage to Scotland if you surrender immediately, otherwise comes the headsman's block, the fate you've dealt to so many enemies now waiting for your own neck. Medieval justice operates by simple mathematics. Those who live by the sword die by similar instruments, and queens who order executions eventually face their own reckoning with sharp steel." But as you stand in Hexham's courtyard holding your son's hand while Scottish allies count final profits and English enemies approach with justice sharpened to killing edges, you realise that some victories transcend immediate defeat. Your desperate fight for his crown has indeed started something that will outlive you both. 30 years of war that will reshape England's soul, teach the kingdom that crowns change hands through, blood rather than birth, and prove that foreign queens with English sons can leave marks deeper than time can heal. You stand on the deck of the Scottish ship that carries you away from England for the last time, watching your kingdom shrink into morning mist like a dream, dissolving at awakening. The salt spray tastes bitter as unshed tears, each wave carrying you further from the crown your son will never wear, and closer to the exile that will define the rest of your days. Your son Edward, no longer Prince of Wales, now just another refugee child with royal blood and empty titles, grips the ship's railing with white knuckles, his 11-year-old face bearing the particular pallor that comes from watching everything you've ever known disappear behind foreign horizons. He's learned that kingdoms can be lost as easily as childhood games, that crowns slip away like sand through desperate fingers. The Scottish captain approaches with the professional courtesy that merchants show valuable cargo, his weathered face bearing decades of experience ferrying political exiles between kingdoms that rise and fall like tides. "Your Majesty," he says, though the title sounds increasingly theoretical with each mile of ocean between you and English soil. "We should reach Calais by evening. The French court has prepared appropriate accommodations. Appropriate accommodations. The euphemism tastes like diplomatic charity, foreign hospitality that transforms queens into professional guests dependent on others' generosity. Your crown will be preserved in French courts like a museum piece, honoured but powerless, remembered but irrelevant to the actual business of ruling kingdoms. Behind you, England disappears into sea mist and historical footnotes, but the war you started continues burning like wildfire across the countryside. You'll never see again. Edward of York may wear the crown now, but the precedent you've established, that English thrones change hands through violence rather than inheritance, will outlive both your reigns. You've taught the kingdom that crowns are taken, not given. Your husband Henry sits in a chair they've bolted to the deck, his vacant eyes staring at seagulls that follow the ship like aerial mourners attending a floating funeral. Occasionally he nods at invisible courtiers, speaks to spirits that populate his private madness, makes observations that cut deeper than sanity should allow. "The birds know we're leaving," he says, watching gulls wheel overhead. "They remember when we arrived. Strange how beginnings and endings look the same from above." beginnings and endings looking the same from above. Your husband's broken mind has stumbled onto profound truth. Your arrival in England as a 15-year-old French princess, hoping to bring peace between nations, mirrors your departure as a 38-year-old queen who brought 30 years of war instead. History comes full circle, but the circle is drawn in blood. The ship's yimbio, movement beneath your feet, feels like the rocking of a cradle, but you're not being born into anything. You're being carried away from everything you fought to preserve. Each wave takes you further from the throne your son should inherit, and closer to foreign courts where former queens become cautionary tales told to amuse current monarchs. A French diplomat emerges from below deck with documents that probably detail your future status, pension arrangements, housing assignments, the administrative framework that transforms royal refugees into international curiosities. His smile carries the practiced sympathy that bureaucrats show when processing historical footnotes into comfortable obscurity. Your Majesty, or he begins with the elaborate courtesy that diplomats reserve for fallen royalty. King Louis extends his warmest welcome and assures you that France remembers its loyal daughter. Appropriate arrangements have been made for your transition to private life. Transition to private life. The phrase hits like a physical blow, diplomatic language that transforms a queenship into retirement, political exile into personal choice. You who commanded armies, ordered executions, reshaped England's destiny through sheer force of maternal will, now face a future of French charity and Scottish memories. Your son looks up from the ship's railing with eyes that have seen too much history for his 11 years. "Mother?" he asks with the terrible clarity that comes from childhood's end. "Will we ever go home again? Will I ever be king like father was? Will he ever be king?" The question hangs in the salt air like seagulls suspended between sky and sea, heavy with implications that extend far beyond immediate exile. Your son will grow up knowing his birthright was stolen, that his mother's desperate choices transformed him from heir to England into pensioner of France. But as you watch English coastline fade into historical abstraction, you understand that some victories transcend immediate defeat. Your fight for his crown has indeed started something larger than personal ambition, a 30-year war that will teach England new lessons about power, legitimacy, and the price of wearing crowns purchased with foreign gold. The she-wolf of France sails toward exile, but the wolf pack she's unleashed will hunt across English countryside for decades, and the kingdom will remember that maternal love, when armed with sufficient desperation, can reshape the destiny of nations. The French court receives you with the elaborate courtesy reserved for exotic animals, magnificent to observe, fascinating to discuss, but ultimately confined to carefully constructed enclosures that prevent them from causing further damage. Your new residence in Cure Castle is beautiful, comfortable, and utterly powerless, like a gilded cage designed by architects who understand that fallen queens require different accommodations than ruling ones. Your son Edward, now 12 and wise beyond his years in the mathematics of political irrelevance, adapts to exile with the resilience that children develop when their entire world reshapes itself around adult failures. He learns French court etiquette, studies Latin with tutors who remember when he was supposed to inherit England, and slowly transforms from Prince of Wales into international curiosity. The news from England arrives with each merchant ship and diplomatic courier, carrying reports of the war that continues raging across the kingdom you tried to save. Edward of York, now firmly established as Edward IV, faces constant rebellions from lords who remember Lancaster's cause, while your former Scottish allies raid the northern counties with the enthusiasm of debt collectors pursuing overdue accounts. Your Majesty, the French Chamberlain announces with practiced discretion, dispatches from England. It seems the Earl of Warwick has reconsidered his loyalties. He presents documents sealed with wax that carries the scent of distant battlefields and fresh political calculations. Warwick, the kingmaker, the man who helped Edward of York claim the throne, has discovered that making kings is easier than controlling them. The dispatches detail his growing dissatisfaction with the monarch he created, his secret negotiations with French diplomats, his emerging belief that perhaps Lancaster deserves another opportunity to demonstrate royal competence. Your husband Henry, now a permanent resident of whatever reality his broken mind has constructed, speaks to the French courtyard with the accidental wisdom that madness occasionally provides. The wheel keeps turning, he observes, watching servants tend gardens that bloom with foreign flowers. Kings fall down, queens fall down, everyone falls down. But the wheel never stops turning. The wheel never stops turning. Your husband's shattered consciousness has grasped essential truth about medieval politics. Power circles between hands like wheels turning through seasons, and today's exiles often become tomorrow's restoration candidates. The war you started has acquired its own momentum, grinding through English nobility like mill wheels processing grain. Your son approaches with a letter he's been writing, his young face bearing the concentrated seriousness of someone composing important documents. "Mother," he says, showing you pages covered with careful script, "I've been writing to the lords who supported us. Lord Clifford's son, the Somerset cousins, others who remember father's reign. Do you think they might help us return?" Might they help you return? The question carries all the hope that exile breeds in hearts too young to understand that some doors, once closed, require extraordinary force to reopen. But as you read his letters, carefully crafted appeals to loyalty, honour, and the abstract principle of legitimate succession, you realise he's inherited more than royal blood. He's inherited your inability to surrender. The French courtiers treat your small court with the amused indulgence that adults show children playing with toy kingdoms, their smiles carrying the patronising warmth of hosts entertaining guests who tell interesting stories about foreign disasters. They remember when you were Queen of England. Now you're simply Margaret of Anjou, international curiosity with excellent anecdotes. But the dispatches keep arriving, each one carrying fresh evidence that the war you ignited continues burning across English countryside like wildfire that feeds on its own destruction. Edward IV faces rebellion in Yorkshire, Scottish raids in Northumberland, French intrigues in London, and the growing sense that perhaps crowns change hands more frequently than medieval tradition suggested. A messenger arrives bearing news that makes your pulse quicken, like war drums summoning soldiers to forgotten battles. Warwick has indeed switched sides, driven by wounded pride and political calculation into alliance with the very queen he once opposed. The Kingmaker wants to unmake his creation and restore Lancaster to power. "Your Majesty," the messenger reports with the breathless excitement of someone bearing impossibly good news, "the Earl of Warwick requests your assistance in restoring rightful monarchy to England. He offers his daughter's hand in marriage to Prince Edward, alliance between York and Lancaster through matrimonial union." Marriage alliance between your son and Warwick's daughter, the political solution that transforms enemies into family, rebels into allies, exile into opportunity for restoration. The wheel your husband mentioned has indeed turned, bringing you from powerless refugee to essential partner in England's next political revolution. Your son looks up from his correspondence with eyes that suddenly blaze with inherited ambition. 12 years old, but already understanding that marriages are diplomatic treaties written in wedding vows. "Mother," he asks with devastating clarity, "does this mean we're going home?" Going home. The phrase tastes like honey mixed with poison, sweet possibility contaminated by bitter memory of everything exile has cost. But as you hold Warwick's offer and watch your son's face transform from resignation to hope, you understand that maternal love, when armed with political opportunity, never truly surrenders. The she-wolf of France may have been driven from England, but wolves are persistent hunters, and the kingdom that exiled you is about to learn that some predators become more dangerous after they've been wounded. You stand once more on English soil, older, wiser, scarred by years of exile that taught you the difference between crowns and kingdoms, watching your son Edward marry Warwick's daughter in a ceremony that transforms enemies into family and political necessity into sacramental bond. The year is 1470, and the wheel of fortune has turned again, bringing Lancaster back from French exile to English opportunity. Your son, now 17 and bearing the face of a man who's inherited both royal blood and hard-won wisdom about its prize, exchanges vows with Anne Neville in Westminster Abbey, while outside London bells ring with the uncertain joy of citizens who've learned that crowns change hands as frequently as seasonal weather. This marriage represents more than diplomatic alliance. It's the fusion of two families who spent decades trying to destroy each other. The restoration comes swiftly, almost anticlimactically, after so many years of blood and exile. Edward the IV flees to Burgundy like a thief in the night. Your husband Henry sits once more on the throne of England with his vacant eyes and accidental wisdom, and you find yourself back in the role you never truly abandoned, the power behind a crown worn by madness but wielded by maternal determination. But you've learned something in exile that victory never taught. Crowns are temporary, but the wars fought for them echo across generations like stones thrown into still water, creating ripples that reach shores no one anticipated. Your desperate fight for your son's birthright didn't just start a 30-year war, it transformed the very nature of English monarchy, teaching the kingdom that legitimacy comes from strength rather than birth. Your husband Henry, restored to his throne but unchanged in his madness, speaks to the Westminster shadows with the prophetic clarity that broken minds sometimes achieve. "The roses keep blooming," he observes, staring at tapestries that depict gardens more peaceful than any England has known. "Red roses, white roses, they all need the same soil. Strange how flowers feed on what's buried beneath them. Red roses and white roses feeding on buried things." Your husband's shattered consciousness has grasped the essential truth about your war. It's not really about Lancaster versus York, legitimate succession versus usurpation, or even foreign queens versus native kings. It's about the soil of England itself, enriched by decades of noble blood and royal ambition, growing flowers that bloom in colours determined by whoever holds the gardener's tools. Your son Edward, now Prince of Wales in fact as well as title, stands beside his new bride with the confidence of someone who's learned that kingdoms are won through persistence rather than birthright. At 17, he understands what you've spent 25 years teaching England. Crowns go to those willing to fight for them, regardless of genealogical charts or legal precedents. But the victory tastes different than you expected, sweeter and more bitter simultaneously, like wine that's aged in barrels stained with too much history. You've achieved everything you set out to accomplish. Your husband restored, your son recognised, your family back on the throne, yet the kingdom you've reclaimed feels fundamentally changed by the methods required to reclaim it. News arrives from the north that Edward IV has landed with Burgundian troops, ready to reclaim his throne through the same mathematics of violence that restored yours. The wheel turns again, medieval politics grinding through its endless cycle of rebellion and restoration. Each revolution adding another layer to the soil that feeds England's bloody garden. But as you stand in the palace where your journey began 25 years ago, older now, marked by exile and loss, but still the mother who refused to let her child's birthright be stolen, you realise that some victories transcend immediate defeat. Your desperate gamble for one son's crown has taught an entire kingdom new lessons about power, persistence, and the price of wearing crowns that must be won rather than inherited. The she-wolf of France looks out over the London she's reclaimed, knowing that tomorrow may bring fresh battles, new exiles, different combinations of roses blooming in English soil. But tonight, your son wears the title you fought to preserve, your husband sits on the throne you refused to abandon, and England has learned that maternal love, when armed with sufficient determination, can indeed start wars that echo across centuries. The war you began will outlive you all, not because it was necessary, but because it proved that in England, at least, crowns belong to those brave enough or desperate enough to reach for them. And in teaching that lesson to a kingdom, you've ensured that the roses will keep blooming long after everyone has forgotten which colour was supposed to win. Your legacy isn't the throne your son may or may not keep, but the understanding you've given England, that legitimacy is written in blood rather than birth, that queens can be made from French princesses and Scottish alliances, and that 30 years of war is sometimes the price that love demands from those who refuse to surrender their children's future to other people's ambition. The she-wolf of France has won her final victory, not by keeping her son's crown, but by proving that some fights are worth having regardless of their outcome, and that maternal devotion, when tested by history's cruelest circumstances, can indeed reshape the destiny of nations. As the London bells ring in celebration of restoration, you understand that your story ends not with victory or defeat, but with transformation of yourself, your son, and the kingdom that will forever remember the French queen who taught England that crowns are won through love fierce enough to start wars, and that some battles echo across centuries because they reveal truths too important to be forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most tumultuous periods. The Wars of the Roses would indeed continue for decades, but Margaret of Anjou's desperate fight for her son's crown had set forces in motion that would reshape English monarchy forever. Sweet dreams, and remember, sometimes the most important victories are the ones that teach us what we're truly willing to fight for.